All right, welcome back, everybody. Wind's picked up a little bit out here today, so I've got the hat back on. It's just a little chilly, but I'm doing okay. Igloo's about half finished. Probably won't have a video for you guys tomorrow because I got too much work to do around camp, but I sort of wanted to talk about the assignments. First of all, you got to make sure you go to Canvas. It looks like I made a very slight miscalculation and did not enable the unit. So if you guys have already been there and you couldn't find the class, rest assured that's been fixed. Okay, you can now actually get to it. What I want to do today is actually go through the rest of the lesson that we were working on, and that is basically going to cover all of the work for today and tomorrow. And then on Friday, I'll be back. We're going to do grammar. I also kind of wanted to get a little feel from you guys whether or not you wanted to actually host a virtual classroom. I know that some people have been doing that. I get it. The main thing I understand that most people are kind of wanting to do is to stay in touch, right? You're all separated from your friends. We're not at school. We're not really hanging out. But if you guys want to get in, have a chat with a bunch of people, I got no beef with that. I need to know sort of what time you guys want to do it. There'll be some basic rules. Obviously, I can't have absolute pandemonium. But if you guys want to be able to catch up and talk and everything to the people that maybe you don't know that well, we can work that out. I want to also talk about the grading a little bit. There are going to be grades recorded for this, okay? If you don't love your grade in my class, you've got a chance to improve it, okay? I'm not going to lower anybody's grade from here, but if you want to learn more, if you want to pick up some more skills, and if you want to improve your grade, you've got that opportunity. It's just going to take a little bit of work on your part. These lessons aren't that tough. I will say the space race stuff that we're doing is rather fascinating, as a matter of fact. There's a whole lot that has gone on during this event. Okay, it was a big event in American history. It kind of shaped who we are as a country and who we are today. And so it's one of those things that learning about it is cool. In addition to that, the actual events that took place, if any of you guys have done some of the stuff that I gave on yesterday, you'll see that some of the stories are pretty interesting. And I want to sort of go through what they are. So I'll go ahead and impose the images on top of my talking, and then we'll kind of talk about it and see what's going on. I hope you guys are enjoying the videos. It's a little bit more work than I'd anticipated, but it's fun. And I think it's good for you guys. So we're going to go ahead and go through these things one by one and sort of answer all of the questions. So bear with me for a second here, and we're going to load up the questions. Okay, so on the second tab that we had after going over the Sputnik launch, we've got another story talking about a guy's reaction, a kid, at his family farm, talking about the launch of Sputnik and how it came on the radio and what his mom thought about it. The first question they ask is, how did he know about Sputnik? Where did he gather this information? The answer to that one is, of course, he had read science fiction. Okay, a lot of this stuff had come from science journals. He had a pretty good working understanding of what was going on. You have to remember it's not as obvious as it may seem to you guys. You know, back in these days, there was no internet. Okay, there was reading a book. And so all these guys had to get their information through proper literature, through the education system and so forth. There was no way to look things up online. You'd go down to the local library and you'd get out an encyclopedia and you'd do research. But this kid was clearly very interested in that stuff, and so he had a pretty good understanding of it. So the answer to that first question is he got it through reading. Okay, he knew what the Sputnik was. He understood what its purpose was through journals, the news, science fiction, and just things that he'd read at the library. So that's the answer to the first question. The second question was, how did Homer's family and the people in his community react to the news about Sputnik? And why do they react this way? Well, the simple answer to that one is the people were worried. People were concerned because America had been flat out defeated, right? We were supposed to be the first ones into space. We were supposed to be the ones who were the pioneers here. And instead, the Soviets had gotten there first. And that was a frustration. You know, he even said to his mom, hey, we're working on one too, and we were supposed to launch first, but somehow they beat us to it. And that was kind of a point of pride thing. So if you think about how Americans must have felt in that situation, defeat is a good word. Worried might be another thing you could say, because people are concerned. They don't want to be behind their competitors. You want to be in front of your competitors. And so, that was obviously a big thing to people. So that's the answer to the second question is people were concerned, okay, for lack of a better, a more profound explanation. The third thing here is, what was the difference between what was heard on the radio before October 5th, 1957 and after this date? And then according to Johnny Villani, why was the change important for students? Well, the simple thing on that, guys, is that was the date Sputnik was launched, right? And so they stopped focusing as much on entertainment and pop and music and things like that and culture. And they really started focusing on the science. They didn't want to continue falling behind. You know, those of you that participate in a sport, when you're behind in the game, you give it everything you've got, right? You work harder so you can catch back up. You don't just kind of sit there and say, oh, well, you know, we're behind. It's okay. So they changed what they were playing on the radio. They kept reminding themselves and playing that beep, beep, beep over and over again, because they wanted to make sure that they were going to get caught back up. They didn't want to be, you know, sitting here behind the Russians and perpetually behind the Russians. That bothered them and concerned them. So that answers the things on the second tab there. Now the third tab is the one talking about the dog. And I got to tell you, going through this thing on the dog, this is a pretty crazy story, right? So those of you that haven't read it yet, I still want you to read it because you'll find it's fairly interesting, okay? Basically, the Russians, the Soviets, went and found this mutt dog, and it was very calm. It was very laid back. It was easily trained, and it made it a very good pet, okay? And that first question is, what characteristics made Laika, that's the name of the dog, a good pet? Would these qualities make her a good candidate to be a space traveler? Explain your answer. I mean, put some thought into this, guys, but the things that they say right out of the gate is she was intelligent, calm, and easily trained. I think that gives you a pretty good idea of whether or not she's going to make a very good cosmonaut, right? What the Russians called an astronaut. The second thing, describe all the conditions that placed stress on Laika's body in space and explain her reaction to these conditions. So this dog, they load up in a capsule and they fire it into space. And there's a lot going on there, right? You got to think about how that's going to work. You know, you guys have been in a car. You guys understand acceleration forces, right? So if you think about being in this rocket, right, it's going to throw you back in the seat, right? And you're buckled in there real hard, and it's going to push everything against you, right? Think about the fastest car you've ever been on, and that's nothing on this, right? This is massive, massive acceleration. And so this dog had to go through that. Now, dogs don't have the same level of understanding that we do. They don't know why they're accelerating. And most of the time when dogs are frightened, they sort of reach out to their human companions for reassurance, for guidance, to make sure, hey, it's okay, we're fine, right? You guys have probably experienced that with your own pets. You know, they hear a loud noise, something goes wrong, something breaks, and the dog instantly looks at you and says, hey, what's going on? You gonna take care of me? And that's what we do, right, as humans. So this dog, he's in this capsule by himself, right? And so there's a lot to that. So again, I want you to read through this one and really get your teeth into it, because it's a cool story, right? What happened to this dog and the way that its space exploration went is pretty crazy. And people had a lot of reactions to that. And that's the third question. A lot of pro-animal activists were angry about Laika's treatment in space, but the American officials said nothing. Why do you think that was the case, right? Laika didn't exactly have this really good go of things because obviously they weren't prepared. Americans did not jump on that bandwagon, and that is explained at the end of the article. So find at the end of that article, why is it that the Americans had nothing to say? I'll give you a hint. It involves a bear. So find that and post your answers. What you guys have to have done, what I want you guys to have done is all of these slides, right? So if you look, we've got sections 3, 4, and 5, each of which contains 5 different slides. I just want you to answer all those questions and fill them out. Basically, it's just to get some background knowledge about how the space race went, what was going on, and what we accomplished and what the Soviets accomplished, okay? And by the way, I use Soviets and Russians pretty well interchangeably. They're not the same, okay? For those of you that want the actual historical context behind that, Russia was a part of the Soviet Union. It was the main part. It was the biggest part. It was the part with the most political and economic influence, but it wasn't the only part. So just keep that in the back of your head. Basically, the Russian Federation added a whole bunch of additional territories to it and called it United Soviet Socialist Republic, USSR, and that's the Soviets. So a little bit of history that maybe you didn't want to know. So that's the section about the dog. The next section that we've got is the memorandum from the vice president, okay? Basically, this is a letter that was written asking the vice president, what's going on? Question number one is President Kennedy asks if Americans have a chance at beating the Soviets. How does he think Americans might be able to beat them? In this thing, the main thing that I'll stress is look at the urgency that JFK has in it, John F. Kennedy. He is concerned at the pace by which we're going. So it's a little dry reading, but if you look to it, his comments are very, very pointed. You know, the very first thing he says, do we have a chance of beating the Soviets by putting a laboratory in space or by a trip around the moon or by a rocket to land on the moon or by a rocket to go to the moon and back with a man? He's looking for any way that they can come out ahead. And his line here, is there any other space program which promises dramatic results in which we could win? Win. Again, the idea here is he wants to win because the Soviets currently have been ahead. The second question is, which questions best show the president's sense of urgency in moving forward the space program? Explain why. There's only a few things on here, right? There's a total of 5 questions that he asked. Read them. They're not that complicated. You'll answer that one pretty easily. Third question is, what questions might Jim Webb, the NASA administrator, Dr. Weisner, the science advisor, and Secretary McNamara, the Secretary of Defense, answer? So you're going to have to look at who does these various things. So let's talk about who these guys are. The NASA administrator is the person who's running NASA, right? The National Aeronautics and Space Association. NASA is in charge of the entirety of the space program. What questions might he answer in that memorandum? Again, to give you clarity on who this memorandum is to, it's to the vice president from the president. So JFK is the acting president. He says, hey, we're behind. Here's some questions I've got. What can we do? And he sends out this memo to the vice president. The questions that he asks, again, are rather pointed. So first question is, who would the NASA administrator, what would he answer? The second one is the science advisor, okay? The science advisor is basically going to be able to answer the questions as to the scientific impact on things. A science advisor is somebody who's going to make sure that the science and the logistics are sound in the project that we're trying to do, that everything can be done with what we have and what we know. The third one is the Secretary of Defense. Now, the Secretary of Defense, there's a big reason that the Secretary of Defense would be in charge of this and have oversight on this. We want to make sure that the Russians, the Soviets, don't get to space first and develop an advantage, an edge up there, because they could use that against us, right? If the Germans use these rockets to kill thousands of people in London, is it possible that the Russians, that the Soviets could do the same thing? Well, yeah, of course it is. And so we don't want that to happen. So the Secretary of Defense is certainly going to have some input on that. So you got those 3 questions right there to answer. On to the next one. This is the actual speech given at Rice University. I'll tell you flat out, it's a really long speech, but it's one that you really ought to see performed. So rather than just reading it, I would really prefer, I'm going to put a link in here, and I'm going to put a link on Google Classroom. I want you to watch the speech and listen to it. Listen to his tone, listen to his excitement. So this was given to 40,000 people at Rice Stadium in Houston, Texas. Okay, it was a big event, and President Kennedy wanted to make sure that Americans knew what we were doing was extremely difficult. And this is one of those speeches that is just kind of echoed in history. People talk about this speech to this day. In fact, I won't be surprised if when you guys hear it, you're like, oh yeah, this is familiar. And another thing I really encourage you to do is, those of you who've got your parents hanging around, get them to watch it with you. See if they remember it, because this is one of those big moments, right? This speech was way back in time. So your parents may have only seen it the same way that I did, because I'm old. But if you even get like your grandparents, they might have actually seen it live on TV, because it was an event. Like, this was one of those things that people were really pumped up about. And it's such a strong speech. It was one of those compelling American moments that, it looks just like it should be in a movie. So I really encourage you to go through and watch the speech. The questions that accompany it are pretty straightforward. One, what does Kennedy worry will happen in outer space if it's not explored by Americans? Well, I just touched on that a few minutes ago, right? We talked about the possibility of it being used by the Russians or the Soviets for military purposes, right? They could use it to cause pain and damage on us. Second, read the speech closely and find 2 examples that show President Kennedy asserting American superiority over the Soviets. He gets pretty specific in this about things that we've done that they haven't done. A little pointer on that one is, one of them is the number of satellites launched. Okay, we've got an edge on that. The third question is, President Kennedy states, "We set sail on this new sea because there is new knowledge to be gained and new rights to be won, and they must be won and used for the progress of all people." Now, when we did our unit over American independence and so forth, I love the fact that he ties back to those old roots, okay, because that was a pivotal idea in American history, okay? Kennedy is sounding just like our founding fathers. He doesn't say the rights of some men. He doesn't say the rights of most men. President Kennedy is pointedly clear and says all men. And that's one of those things that echoes all the way back to our founding days. And I think it's great that he did that. This is one of the reasons that he was known as a very, very good president. Obviously, he had an unfortunate end, but when you're this strong and this passionate about something, you're going to make some enemies. That's just the reality of it. The people that don't make any waves, that don't do anything grand, yeah, I mean, they probably don't end up in a whole lot of trouble, but they're also not remembered as unbelievable and just very passionate, okay? JFK was every bit of that. And so I want you to really look at why he makes those comments and how does he think that all men will benefit if America takes the lead on this, okay? The fourth question here, President Kennedy says, and this is the part of the speech that many, many people know. What does President Kennedy mean when he says, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard"? Why choose the hard thing? And you guys know me for a while now. I believe that anything worth doing should be difficult because that's what challenges you. You know, we've talked about this over and over and over. Are you going to get better doing easy things? If you go out and you have a football game against third graders, are you going to get any better? Are you going to win? Sure. But so how's that feel? How's that gratifying? You win. Okay. Is that the purpose? Or is the purpose to improve and to get better? And he lists a number of things that we've done as Americans, as humans, that he thinks are important because they're difficult. I think this was a really powerful thing, and that's why this echoes still to this day. People still know this speech. And a bonus point to anybody who can figure out, there's a song that I listen to, right, that actually features this. There's a particular band that even took a clip of this, and it's on one of my CDs. Yes, I know, CDs. I'm 1,000 years old, but I still use CDs. Anyhow, this bit is in there. So track it down, figure it out. It's that big of a thing. So that's those questions on this section. I'm going to make another video, and it's going to go over the next section. We're going to do the same thing. I'm just going to give you the guidance as though we were in the classroom, okay? So quick summation. Go through all those slides, answer all those questions, okay? I'm going to do section 5 here in a second, and then we're going to go ahead and rehash everything, wrap it all up. That'll be that lesson. On Friday, our assignment is going to be to do a grammar lesson. The grammar lessons, as you guys remember, they're really not that tough, but for what it's worth, I didn't realize we were as far ahead in this class as we are. Other than doing the last 2 essays, we've gotten through almost all the material that Amplify had in a very shortened year. So you guys have done fantastic work. I know that the pace has been a little furious at times. I know that some of you have been a little maybe not wanting to keep up this pace, but hey, it's a good thing that we did it because you never know the time you've got. So make the most of it. So that's that for this bit. I'll make another video for the next one. I'll probably publish it. I'll probably publish it tomorrow. And then I just want you to go through those 2 things, round out that lesson. I'll post what grammar lesson we have to do on Friday. I'll have a short video for that. Again, if you guys want to have a live class, tell me. Okay, I'm not going to do it so that I can just sit here and talk to myself. I'm not going to do it so I can just understand that everybody's bored of sitting at home. If you are, that's cool. But you better tell me you want to hang out, because I'm not just going to do it, and I'm not going to give points for it, because I feel like I don't need to bribe you. If you guys want to hang out and ask some questions and talk about what we've gone through, hey, I'd love to do it. But let's make it valuable. As you guys know, I want everything to matter. If there's anything else I can do for you guys, drop me a comment, and I'll be here. All right, you guys, take care.